Chapter 1. Arrival. The Luminara cut through the void like a blade of white fire, its oval hull gleaming against the backdrop of distant stars. Kael sat in the command cradle, his large black eyes fixed on the storm-wracked planet below. Veyrath was unlike any world he had charted. Its atmosphere shimmered with violent plasma arcs, and its surface was a jagged quilt of obsidian cliffs and glowing fissures. The vessel's sensors pulsed with warnings, but Kael ignored them, driven by the strange energy signals that had lured him across light years. He adjusted the vessel's descent, guiding it through a maelstrom of lightning that clawed at the hull. The Luminara shuddered, but its solid design held firm, a testament to alien engineering. As the clouds parted, Kael glimpsed ruins sprawled across the cliffs like scars of forgotten civilizations. Towering spires jutted upward, broken yet defiant, their surfaces etched with glyphs that shimmered faintly in the stormlight. Kael felt a chill ripple through him. These structures were not random. They were deliberate, purposeful, and ancient beyond measure. The vessel landed on a plateau of black stone, its landing struts sinking slightly into the cracked surface. Kael stepped out, the air thick with static, his slender frame silhouetted against the glowing fissures. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of storms. He scanned the horizon, noting the colossal stone doors embedded in a cliff face nearby. They seemed to beckon him, daring him to enter. Kael's instincts told him this was no ordinary ruin. It was a tomb, a labyrinth, a trial. He tightened his grip on his plasma staff, the weapon humming softly in his hands. The adventure had begun, and Veyrath was already whispering its secrets into the storm. Chapter 2. The First Ruins. Kael approached the massive stone doors, their surfaces carved with spiraling glyphs that pulsed faintly as if alive. The air around them vibrated, resonating with a frequency that made his chest ache. He placed his hand against the cold stone, and the glyphs flared, releasing a low rumble that echoed through the cliffs. Slowly, the doors parted, revealing a yawning tunnel that descended into darkness. Kael stepped inside, his staff casting a pale glow that illuminated walls lined with jagged carvings. The passage twisted unnaturally, as though designed to disorient intruders. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that seemed to move when Kael wasn't looking directly at them. The floor shifted beneath his feet, forcing him to leap aside as a section collapsed into a pit of spikes. He landed lightly, his alien reflexes saving him from certain death. The air grew colder, and Kael sensed eyes watching him from the darkness. He pressed forward, determined to uncover the source of the energy signals. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. Crystalline fragments jutted from the walls, glowing faintly like stars trapped in stone. Kael approached one, brushing his fingers across its surface, and felt a surge of power course through him. The chamber seemed alive, humming with ancient energy, yet the silence was broken by a faint sound, a scrape of stone against stone, as if something moved deeper within. Kael froze, his staff raised, realizing he was not alone. The ruins were not abandoned, they were guarded, and whatever lurked in the shadows was waiting for him to make his next move. Chapter 3. Traps of the Ancients. The chamber stretched before Kael like the throat of some vast beast, its walls lined with jagged carvings that seemed to pulse faintly in rhythm with his heartbeat. He stepped cautiously, his staff's glow revealing a floor of uneven stone tiles. The first tile he pressed sank slightly, and the ceiling above groaned. A pendulum of sharpened obsidian swung down, slicing the air where Kael had stood moments before. He leapt aside, his reflexes saving him from being cleaved in two. The walls shifted, grinding against each other, narrowing the passage into a suffocating corridor. Kael pressed forward, his mind racing. These were not ruins left to decay, but deliberate defenses crafted to repel intruders. A bridge of stone stretched across a chasm, its surface cracked and unstable. He tested it with one foot, and the bridge collapsed, forcing him to leap to the opposite ledge. His claws scraped against the stone as he pulled himself up, narrowly avoiding the abyss below. The chamber beyond was filled with crystalline shards jetting from the floor, their tips sharp as blades. Kael maneuvered carefully, weaving between them, his staff illuminating faint glyphs carved into the walls. The glyphs depicted figures resembling his own kind, gray aliens, locked in rituals of worship and sacrifice. He paused, unsettled by the implication that a species had once walked these halls. A faint hum filled the chamber, resonating through the shards. Kael touched one, and it vibrated, releasing a pulse of energy that made the air shimmer. He pocketed a fragment, sensing it might be important later. The chamber's exit loomed ahead, a narrow archway carved with spirals that seemed to twist endlessly inward. Kael stepped through, his mind heavy with questions, his body tense from the traps he had narrowly survived. The ruins were alive, and they were testing him. Chapter 4. The Whispering Jungle. Kael emerged from the ruins into a jungle unlike any he had seen across the stars. Towering trees, with obsidian black bark stretched upward, their branches glowing with bioluminescent vines. The air was thick with mist, shimmering faintly as though infused with energy. Each step he took caused the plants to react, their leaves curling and whispering in tones that echoed in his mind. He paused, realizing the jungle was not merely alive, it was aware. Strange creatures scuttled across the forest floor, their translucent bodies glowing faintly, vanishing into the undergrowth when Kael approached. He collected samples from the vines, noting their strange pulsations that matched the rhythm of the crystalline shards he had found earlier. The jungle seemed to guide him, its paths twisting but always leading deeper. He followed, wary of the unseen intelligence that seemed to orchestrate his journey. A clearing opened ahead, filled with towering flowers that emitted a low hum. Kael approached one, and the petals unfurled, releasing a cloud of glowing spores. The spores swirled around him, forming shapes that resembled glyphs he had seen in the ruins. He realized the jungle itself was a living archive, preserving the memory of the planet's past. Yet the whispers grew louder, forming words in a language Kael barely understood. They spoke of guardians, of trials, of a heart buried deep within the world. Kael tightened his grip on his staff, knowing the jungle was warning him, or perhaps luring him. The clearing darkened suddenly, shadows stretching unnaturally across the ground. Kael sensed movement, something vast shifting in the canopy above. He raised his staff, prepared for whatever came next, as the jungle's whispers turned into a chorus of voices. Veyrath was alive, and it had chosen him as its intruder. Chapter 5. The Rival Appears. Kael moved deeper into the jungle, the whispers of the bioluminescent vines guiding him toward another clearing. The air grew heavier, charged with a presence that was not the planet's own. He froze as a figure stepped from the shadows, tall, slender, and unmistakably familiar. Another gray alien stood before him, his eyes cold and calculating, his movements deliberate. Kael's grip tightened on his plasma staff as the stranger raised his own weapon, a jagged spear humming with energy. "Leave," the alien said, his voice sharp and resonant, echoing unnaturally in the clearing. Kael demanded his name, and the alien replied, "Draxel." The name carried weight, as though Kael had heard it whispered in the ruins themselves. Draxel claimed the planet belonged to him, that its secrets were his to uncover, and that Kael was trespassing. Kael countered, insisting the ruins called to him, that the energy signals had chosen him. The tension between them thickened, the jungle itself falling silent as if listening. For a moment, Kael considered striking, but Draxel's stance was unyielding, his confidence absolute. Instead, Kael lowered his staff slightly, signaling a temporary truce. Draxel sneered, promising they would meet again, but next time, only one of them would walk away. He vanished into the jungle, his movements swift and ghost-like, leaving Kael alone with the whispers. Kael exhaled, his chest tight with unease. He had found another like him, but not an ally, an enemy. The jungle resumed its chorus, but now its whispers carried a warning. The trials ahead would not be faced alone. Chapter 6. The Obsidian Temple. Kael pressed onward, the jungle's paths twisting until they opened onto a cliffside. There, carved into the black stone, loomed a temple of staggering size. Its walls rose like jagged teeth, etched with glyphs that shimmered faintly in the stormlight. Kael approached cautiously, his staff casting pale illumination across the carvings. The glyphs depicted gray aliens kneeling before a massive crystalline core, their forms etched in reverence and fear. He felt a chill. His species had been here before, long ago, and had worshipped something buried deep within Veyrath. The temple's entrance was a gaping maw, its archway lined with spirals that seemed to twist endlessly inward. Kael stepped inside, the air colder, heavier, as though the temple itself resisted his presence. The interior was vast, its walls lined with murals of rituals and sacrifices. Statues of gray aliens stood in rows, their eyes carved to follow intruders. Kael studied the murals, realizing they told a story of power, a relic known as the Crystal Heart, said to grant unimaginable strength. He felt the weight of destiny pressing on him, as though the temple had been waiting for his arrival. Yet he also sensed Draxel's presence, faint but undeniable, somewhere within the temple's depths. Kael tightened his grip on his staff, his resolve hardening. The temple was not merely a ruin, it was a trial, a place where the past and present collided. He stepped deeper into the shadows, knowing the confrontation with Draxel was inevitable. The obsidian temple had secrets to reveal, and Kael intended to claim them, or die trying. Chapter 7. Puzzle of Light. Kael entered the heart of the obsidian temple, where a vast chamber stretched upward into shadow. The walls were lined with polished crystal panels, each angled to catch faint beams of light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. At the center stood a pedestal carved with spirals, its surface etched with glyphs that glowed faintly. When Kael approached, he studied the chamber, realizing it was a puzzle. The beams of light had to be redirected to awaken the pedestal. Kael adjusted the panels, each movement shifting the beams across the chamber in dazzling arcs. The light struck murals on the walls, illuminating scenes of gray aliens kneeling before a radiant core. As the beams aligned, the pedestal began to hum, its glyphs flaring brighter. Kael felt the chamber vibrate, as though the temple itself approved of his progress. With a final adjustment, the beams converged on the pedestal, releasing a pulse of energy that opened a hidden chamber behind it. Inside, relics shimmered, crystalline shards shaped into tools, weapons, and fragments of armor. Kael stepped forward, off-filling him as he reached for one of the relics. But before his fingers touched it, a shadow moved. Draxel emerged from the darkness, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "You solved the puzzle," Draxel sneered. "But the prize is mine." He lunged forward, snatching one of the relics from the pedestal. Kael raised his staff, but Draxel struck first, forcing him back with a surge of energy. The rival vanished into the shadows, leaving Kael with only fragments of the treasure. Kael clenched his jaw, fury burning in his chest. The temple had revealed its secrets, but Draxel had stolen its power. Chapter 8. The Chase. Kael stormed from the chamber, his staff glowing as he pursued Draxel through the twisting corridors of the temple. The rival's footsteps echoed ahead, always just beyond reach. Kael leapt over collapsing bridges, dodged falling shards, and pressed forward with relentless determination. The chase spilled out of the temple into the jungle, where bioluminescent vines writhed as though stirred by the conflict. Draxel darted through the undergrowth, his stolen relic blazing with energy that cut through the mist. Kael followed, his plasma staff slicing vines and branches as he closed the distance. They clashed briefly at a river of molten rock, their weapons sparking as they struck. Draxel kicked Kael back, leaping across the river on a crumbling stone path. Kael followed, narrowly avoiding the molten flow that surged beneath him. The jungle roared with whispers, the plants reacting violently to the battle. Kael hurled a shard of crystal, forcing Draxel to stumble, but the rival recovered quickly. Their fight carried them across cliffs and into caverns, each strike shaking the ground beneath their feet. Kael's determination grew. He would not let Draxel escape with the relic. Yet Draxel was cunning, using the terrain to his advantage, vanishing into shadows and reappearing with sudden strikes. Finally, Draxel disappeared into a fissure that led deeper into the planet's crust. Kael stood at the edge, his chest heaving, his staff glowing faintly in the darkness. He knew the chase was far from over. The relic had changed the balance, and Draxel now held the upper hand. Kael descended into the fissure, his resolve unbroken, ready to face whatever trials awaited below. Chapter 9. The Forgotten City. Kael descended through the fissure, his staff's glow revealing a cavern that stretched endlessly beneath the planet's crust. The air was heavy, thick with dust and the faint hum of unseen machinery. As he pressed forward, the cavern widened into a vast underground city, its streets lined with statues of gray aliens frozen in poses of worship. Their stone faces were solemn, their eyes carved to gaze upward toward a crystalline spire that pierced the cavern ceiling. Kael walked cautiously, his footsteps echoing against the silent stone. The city was eerily intact, as though abandoned in a single moment of catastrophe. Murals along the walls depicted rituals, sacrifices, and the worship of a radiant core, the same crystal heart he had seen in the temple's murals. Kael felt a chill ripple through him. His species had not only visited Veyrath, they had lived here, thrived here, and ultimately perished here. He examined the statues more closely, noticing cracks that pulsed faintly with residual energy. It was as if the city itself still breathed, waiting for something to awaken it. Kael collected fragments of crystal from the streets, each one vibrating faintly in his hands. The silence pressed down on him, broken only by the distant sound of grinding stone. He turned sharply, sensing movement in the shadows. The city was not empty. Something stirred within its ruins. Kael tightened his grip on his staff, his heart pounding. The Forgotten City was more than a relic, it was a tomb, and its guardians had not yet fallen asleep. Chapter 10. The Guardian. The grinding grew louder, reverberating through the cavern like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Kael stepped back as a colossal figure emerged from the shadows, a stone automaton, towering above him, its body carved from obsidian and crystal. Its eyes flared with pale light, locking onto Kael with unyielding focus. The Guardian moved with terrifying precision, each step shaking the ground beneath Kael's feet. He raised his staff, unleashing a surge of plasma energy, but the blast barely scorched the automaton's surface. The Guardian swung a massive arm, forcing Kael to dive aside as the ground shattered where he had stood. Kael realized brute force would not defeat it. The automaton was powered by the same crystalline energy that pulsed through the city. He scanned the chamber, noting glyphs carved into the walls that glowed faintly when struck by the Guardian's movements. Kael darted toward them, redirecting his attacks to the glyphs rather than the automaton itself. Each strike caused the Guardian to falter, its movements slowing as the glyphs dimmed. The battle became a dance of survival, Kael weaving between crushing blows and unleashing precise strikes against the glowing symbols. Finally, with a final surge of energy, the glyphs shattered, and the Guardian collapsed into rubble, its light extinguished. Kael stood panting, his body trembling from the effort. He approached the remains, finding a shard of crystal embedded in its chest. The shard pulsed faintly, pointing toward a deeper chamber beneath the city. Kael pocketed it, his resolve hardening. The Guardian had been a test, a trial meant to protect the path forward. Now the way lay open, and Kael knew the next confrontation would bring him closer to the crystal heart, and to Drax. Chapter 11. Betrayal in the Shadows. Kael followed the shard's guidance deeper into the Forgotten City, where the streets narrowed into shadowed corridors. The air grew colder, the silence broken only by the faint hum of crystalline veins running through the walls. He sensed movement ahead and raised his staff, prepared for another Guardian. Instead, Draxel stepped from the darkness, his stolen relic glowing faintly in his hands. "We cannot reach the heart alone," Draxel said, his voice calm but edged with menace. Kael hesitated, knowing the truth of the words, yet distrusting the rival's intent. The ruins had tested him relentlessly, and he doubted they would allow a single intruder to pass. Against his instincts, Kael lowered his weapon, agreeing to a temporary alliance. Together they pressed forward, navigating corridors lined with traps that demanded cooperation. Kael leapt across collapsing bridges, while Draxel redirected beams of light to disable glyphs. For a moment, Kael felt the weight of shared purpose, as though they were two halves of the same destiny. Yet every glance at Draxel's cold eyes reminded him that betrayal was inevitable. The deeper they went, the more the ruins seemed to respond, glyphs flaring brighter as if recognizing their presence. Kael wondered if the planet itself understood the rivalry between them, feeding on their tension. At last, they reached a chamber sealed by a massive crystalline door. Draxel placed his relic against the surface, and the door shuddered open, revealing a glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kael stepped inside, his chest tight with anticipation. The alliance had served its purpose, but he knew the moment of betrayal was near. Chapter 12. The Crystal Heart. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with crystalline veins that pulsed in rhythm, with a colossal core at its center. The crystal heart floated above a pedestal, radiating light, so intense it painted the chamber in shifting hues. Kael felt its power immediately, a surge that filled his body with strength and dread. The heart whispered in tones that resonated in his mind, promising knowledge, power, and immortality. Draxel stepped forward, his eyes wide with hunger, the stolen relic glowing brighter in response. "It belongs to me," he hissed, reaching toward the core. Kael raised his staff, blocking his path, the chamber vibrating with the clash of their wills. The heart's whispers grew louder, feeding on their rivalry, urging them to fight. Kael struck first, his plasma staff releasing a surge of energy that illuminated the chamber. Draxel countered, his relic amplifying his power, forcing Kael back. The walls cracked, shards of crystal raining down as the heart pulsed violently. Kael realized the relic was not merely a source of power. It was alive, aware, and choosing between them. He lunged forward, striking Draxel across the chest, but the rival recovered swiftly, his eyes burning with fury. The heart's glow intensified, casting shadows that twisted into shapes of gray aliens kneeling in worship. Kael felt the weight of destiny pressing on him, the realization that this was the moment his species had once faced and failed. The chamber shook, the heart's whispers rising into a chorus of voices. Kael tightened his grip, knowing the battle for the crystal heart had begun, and only one of them would leave the chamber alive. Chapter 13. Duel of the Greys. The chamber trembled as Kael and Draxel faced each other, the crystal heart pulsing violently between them. Its light bathed their forms in shifting hues, amplifying every movement, every strike. Kael lunged first, his plasma staff crackling as it clashed against Draxel's relic. Sparks erupted, scattering across the chamber like falling stars. Draxel countered with ruthless precision, his strikes fueled by the heart's whispers. Kael felt the relic's energy surge through his rival, making him faster, stronger, more relentless. Yet Kael's resolve was unyielding. He fought not for greed but for truth, for the secrets buried within Veyrath. Their duel shattered walls, sending shards of crystal raining down around them. Each blow echoed like thunder, the chamber itself groaning under the strain. Kael struck Draxel across the chest, forcing him back, but the rival recovered instantly, his eyes burning with fury. The heart pulsed brighter, its whispers rising into a chorus that urged them to destroy one another. Kael realized the relic was feeding on their conflict, growing stronger with every strike. He pressed forward, channeling his energy into a final, desperate attack. The staff collided with Draxel's relic, unleashing a shockwave that split the chamber floor. Both aliens were thrown back, their bodies battered, their weapons dimmed. Kael rose slowly, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the heart. The duel was far from over, but the chamber itself was beginning to collapse. Chapter 14. Collapse. The crystal heart pulsed violently, its light fracturing into chaotic beams that tore through the chamber walls. Shards of crystal exploded outward, embedding themselves in the floor and ceiling. Kael staggered to his feet, his body trembling from the shockwave. Draxel rose as well, his relic glowing faintly, his eyes locked on the heart with desperate hunger. The chamber groaned, fissures spreading across the walls as the structure began to fail. Kael realized they had little time. The heart's energy was destabilizing the ruins, threatening to consume them both. He sprinted toward the pedestal, determined to strike the heart and end its influence. Draxel intercepted him, their weapons clashing once more amid the chaos. The ground split beneath them, molten light surging upward from the planet's core. Kael leapt aside, narrowly avoiding the fissure, his staff glowing faintly in the storm of energy. He struck Draxel again, forcing him back, but the rival's determination was unbroken. The heart pulsed brighter, its whispers rising into a deafening chorus that filled Kael's mind. He felt his strength waning, his body battered, his resolve tested. The chamber collapsed further, massive chunks of stone falling from above. Kael pressed forward, his eyes fixed on the heart. Knowing this was the final trial, he raised his staff, prepared to strike, as the chamber's walls crumbled around him. The collapse was inevitable, and Kael understood that survival was no longer guaranteed. Chapter 15. The Wicked. The chamber was collapsing, its walls splitting apart as the crystal heart pulsed with uncontrollable fury. Kael staggered forward, his body battered, his staff glowing faintly in the storm of energy. Draxel stood across from him, his relic dimming, his eyes locked on the heart with desperate hunger. The whispers grew louder, filling Kael's mind with promises of power, of immortality, of dominion over the stars. He ignored them, focusing instead on the truth. The heart was a parasite, feeding on conflict, consuming all who sought it. The floor cracked beneath his feet, molten light surging upward from the planet's core. Kael leapt across the fissure, landing near the pedestal where the heart hovered. Its glow was blinding now, casting shadows that twisted into forms of gray aliens kneeling in eternal worship. He raised his staff, channeling the last of his strength into a single strike. Draxel lunged, his weapon clashing against Kael's, sparks erupting as the chamber shook violently. Kael pressed forward, his eyes burning with resolve, his body trembling from exhaustion. He struck again, forcing Draxel back, but the rival recovered instantly, his fury unbroken. The heart pulsed brighter, its whispers rising into a deafening chorus that drowned out all thought. Kael felt his strength waning, his body battered, his resolve tested. Yet he knew this was the final trial, the moment that would decide the fate of Veyrath. With a final surge, Kael drove his staff into the heart. The chamber erupted in light, a shockwave tearing through the ruins. Draxel was thrown clear, his body crashing against the far wall. Kael, however, was caught in the blast, his form engulfed by the heart's energy. He screamed silently, his body dissolving into shards of light, merging with the crystal fragments that rained down around him. The chamber collapsed fully, the ceiling crumbling, the walls shattering into rubble. Draxel rose slowly, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with shock. He searched the ruins, but Kael was gone, consumed by the heart, his essence scattered across the crystalline veins of the planet. The whispers faded, leaving only silence, broken by the distant rumble of the collapsing city. Above, the Luminara stirred. The vessel's systems flared to life, its hull glowing faintly with the same energy that had consumed Kael. It lifted from the plateau, rising into the stormy skies, without a pilot. Draxel watched, his expression twisted with both triumph and dread. The ship carried Kael's essence, fused with the heart, a ghostly guardian bound to the relic forever. Kael had died, but his sacrifice had not destroyed the heart. Instead, it had claimed him, binding his soul to Veyrath's legacy. Draxel stood alone in the ruins, victorious yet haunted, knowing Kael's presence would linger in the cosmos. The whispers might have faded, but the legend of Kael, the gray alien who defied the heart, would echo across the stars. And somewhere, within the glowing hull of the Luminara, Kael's eyes opened one final time, not in flesh but in light. His gaze was cold, eternal, and unyielding. The heart had taken him, but in death, Kael had become something more, a guardian, a warning, a shadow that would never fade.